What's up, Jamers? Today we're doing a little bit of a different style video. So if you are at least a little tiny bit interested in learning a little bit about Yu-Gi-Oh, keep on watching, because I'm talking about the difference between the stack and the chain. Coming from my background, I'll talk a little bit about myself here, is that I am a ex-professional Yu-Gi-Oh player. I have over 10 regional top cut appearances. My highest placement is third place in YCS Memphis back in 2017. I have a number of other top 8 placements as well in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I've recently started playing Magic as of about 2.5 years ago, and I make Magic the Gathering content ever since. Now, both the chain and the stack determines the order of resolution of cards and effects. The chain for Yu-Gi-Oh! And the stack for Magic, as you're probably familiar with. Both the chain and the stack both resolve backwards, but they resolve completely differently. The stack is the game zone where spells and abilities are put when they are played and where they wait to resolve. The stack in Magic is a physical place that you put the card. In Yu-Gi-Oh, it's not quite that simple, but the stack system allows players to respond to the actions of other players before the actions take a full effect, enabling interactive gameplay, even with the instantaneous effects that go on the stack however you'd like them to. But when the stack is resolving, you can add other spells or abilities to the stack on top of the resolving stack as it's resolving, and then it will continue to resolve afterward. You can have a stack activated card or effect, card or effect, card or effect in response to one another. And then one effect can resolve, that card will go to the graveyard. And then you can add another card on top of the stack, and it will keep resolving. Resolve 2 down, add one more on the stack, and it keeps resolving like that. Let's talk about how that differs from the chain. And this gets a little bit complicated, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. The card or effect that started the chain is called Chain Link 1. And if a card or effect is used to respond or chain to another card, that would be Chain Link 2, and so forth. And you can go up to Chain Link 27 if you would like to. It's all as a part of the chain resolving. If a card is moved to another location as the stack is resolving or in between the stack, there's a little bit of a specific card interactions that go on there. The effect will be nullified, or it's called fizzling. Just to give you a little bit of a quick example of that, I'm going to go over to my friend DD Crow over here. If you know this from Yu-Gi-Oh, this will be very familiar to you. It says quick effect, which means it can be responded. This can respond to another card. You can discard this card to the graveyard, then target one card in your opponent's graveyard, banish that target. So exile if you're a Magic fan. Say you have a card, and you discard this card, Atlantean Dragoons, as cost to activate a Water Monster's effect. This card would be able to search a card from your deck. But you can respond to that by exiling or banishing Dragoons from your opponent's graveyard using a card like DD Crow, and the Atlantean Dragoons will be considered being exiled from the graveyard before it actually got the ability to resolve on the stack or chain. Once both players have decided not to add to the chain anymore, 27 is just enough for you, then the chain is completed. It just stops. Unlike Magic, when I said before about the stack, that you can keep adding on once it's resolving still, once the last card is added to the chain, and no player wants to add another card to the chain, it automatically resolves all of it. Cards and effects can only be added to a chain while it is being constructed. There's a little bit of a nuance with the chain that doesn't actually happen in Magic. In Magic, you can use a card in response to another card, and it'll be added onto the chain. And if you have another quick effect, the opponent has one, you can do that as well. And you can go on in the chain or the stack for however many instant speed effects that you want to use. In Yu-Gi-Oh, there's different kinds of these effects called spell speeds. Starting out with spell speed 1, this can only be used on your turn. It can only be Chain Link 1. And that is a card that's iconic. It's Radeki. This has spell card here, right here, and it doesn't have any symbol next to it, and it just destroys all monsters your opponent controls. You can then respond to this with a spell speed 2 card, and that's what we're going to be talking about next. And that one is an iconic Magic Cylinder. This is a spell speed 2 card because it can be used on your opponent's turn, unlike spell speed 1 cards like Radeki. This is when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can just flip this card and your opponent takes the damage instead of you. This is just one example of a spell speed 2 card, but there's other spell speed 2 cards like quick play spell cards that can be used during either player's turn as well. And you can respond to spell speed 1 cards with these cards, even if it's your own turn. There's another level of this, spell speed 3, and you probably know this card if you watch the Yu-Gi-Oh show, but it is Solemn Judgment. This card has a little bit of arrow, a little arrow next to it if you look at it there. When a monster would be summoned or a spell or trap card is activated, you can pay half your life points to negate the summon or activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Now, Spell Speed 3 is a very special spell speed because Spell Speed 2 cards cannot respond to this card at all. It doesn't matter what your Magic Cylinder or any other Spell Speed 2 card says on the card, you cannot respond to this card with that card. All of a sudden, the only cards that you can respond to in that specific chain is another Spell Speed 3 card. There is one other type of card that Solemn Judgment cannot negate. That is one of our little special cases in Super Polymerization. Usually Solemn Judgment would be able to respond to anything unless it specifically says on a card that it cannot be responded to. This card literally says neither player can activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation, and there's a number of cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That say this, which might make you think, wow, those cards are just too good. You can't stop them with Solemn Judgment or any other Spell Speed 3 card, but that's what's written on the card in those special cases. There's also a little special case with the chain as well. This is why I'm saying the chain is a little bit more confusing than the stack. But it's concept of chain blocking. And before I talk about chain blocking, I'll let you know that when simultaneous effects happen in Yu-Gi-Oh!, the player that owns those cards can resolve them in any order they'd like. The one thing being that mandatory effects have to resolve earlier on in the chain than optional effects, and this is stated on each card with the words, you can. And if it doesn't say you can, you have to. In the effect of a card like Ash Blossom in Joyous Spring, when a card or effect is activated that includes any of these effects, you can discard this card. That is an example of an optional effect. If it just said discard this card without the you can in front of it, it would be considered mandatory. So let's go off of that notion to talk about chain blocking. The player that owns the cards happening that are resolving at the same time can choose how they want to do that. But say the effects are all optional. You can order those any way you'd like. And say you don't want your opponent to use this sneaky little Ash Blossom friend to negate your, let's say, Tri-Brigade Nerval, which would go to search one of your things. What if you want to search your Tri-Brigade card, and you don't want your opponent to use Ash Blossom on it to negate the ability to search the card? You can do what's called in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Called chain blocking. You can only respond to the card that's last on the chain. So if you put Tri-Brigade Nerval as Chain Link 1, and another effect happening at the same time as Chain Link 2, all of a sudden Ash Blossom just cannot negate the Nerval. If this was a stack instead of a chain, if this were in Magic the Gathering, you could use Ash Blossom on the Nerval, because in Magic, you can use a card that's like Negate to stop an opponent's Teferi Hero of Dominaria, even if it's 4 cards down the stack. In Yu-Gi-Oh! You cannot add to the stack while it's resolving, and you can only respond to the last thing on the chain. Thank you all for learning a little bit about how the chain resolves, and how the stack resolves, and how these two differ. And I hope you give it a like, and give it a subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.